The path to the number 2 seed was wide open, and that's what makes this entire situation so frustrating to break down with you right now. Everything aligned. Detroit handled its business against Chicago. The scenario the Eagles needed was sitting right there, gift-wrapped, requiring just one more win against a Washington team that had nothing to play for. And yet, the Eagles are heading into the postseason as the 3 seed. Not because of bad luck, not because of an elite opponent, but because of a calculated decision that backfired. This wasn't about talent. This wasn't about effort from the players who suited up. This came down to a choice made on the sideline. Nick Sirianni chose caution over opportunity. He chose long-term health over immediate positioning. And while that logic isn't reckless on its face, the context matters. The Eagles were never getting a true bye week unless they rested starters in Week 18, and even then, the reward would have been enormous. The number 2 seed doesn't just mean one less game on the road. It potentially means the playoffs running through Philadelphia. It means avoiding certain matchups. It means controlling your destiny instead of reacting to it. And in a loaded NFC, the path matters more than ever. The frustrating part is this didn't require full commitment from the starters for 4 quarters. No one was asking for that. This game was decided by one score. It stayed within reach from start to finish. The Eagles had 2 trips inside the red zone in the first half and walked away with 0 points. 0. That's where the absence of the starting offense mattered most. This team, all season long, has been stronger early in games and has struggled to finish. Playing the starters for just one half could have changed everything. Build a lead, control the tempo, then hand it over to the backups. That was the middle ground, and it was never taken. What makes the logic harder to defend is the inconsistency in how risk was managed. DeVonta Smith played significant snaps to reach the 1,000-yard mark, and he deserved that milestone. He's been one of the most reliable and selfless players on this roster from start to finish. But if you're willing to risk your most consistent offensive weapon for an individual achievement, how do you justify not pushing a little further for a strategic advantage that impacts the entire postseason? That contradiction is where fans are getting stuck, and honestly, it's fair. This team has been remarkably healthy all season. Fewest games lost to injured starters in the entire league. That hasn't happened by accident. Health matters. It helped fuel deep runs before, but health alone doesn't win championships if the road becomes unnecessarily harder. The NFC isn't forgiving. Every matchup carries real danger, and small margins define January football. Confidence is earned, but complacency is punished. The Eagles now find themselves hosting San Francisco in the wild card round, and while that matchup is far from a nightmare, it's still not what could have been. The 49ers are banged up, especially on defense. They won't have key stars. Their pass rush has been inconsistent all season. On paper, this is a game the Eagles should win at home. But that doesn't erase the fact that the easier road was right there for the taking. Green Bay would have been a far more favorable first-round opponent, and history backs that up. What's also lingering is the broader theme of this season. Conservative decisions, playing not to lose instead of playing to dominate. We've seen it in second-half play calling. We saw it again here. This roster is built to dictate games, not tiptoe around them. And when you zoom out, this loss didn't just cost seeding, it cost margin for error. Now every round carries pressure, every mistake is magnified, and there's no safety net.
Still, the door is far from closed. The Eagles are talented enough to beat anyone in the NFC. They're battle-tested, physical, and when they play clean football, they can overwhelm opponents. The path is tougher, but it's still there. That's what makes this moment so complicated. You can acknowledge the opportunity that slipped away while still believing this team can make a run. Both things can be true at the same time. So as we look ahead to the postseason and reflect on how the Eagles arrived here, I want to know where you stand on this decision. Do you believe prioritizing health over the number 2 seed was the right call, or do you think this was a mistake that made an already difficult playoff road even harder than it needed to be? The reality now is that the Eagles have no choice but to live with that decision and move forward, and that's where the conversation has to shift from frustration to accountability on the field. Because whether you agree with how they got here or not, the matchup is set, and it's one that tells us a lot about who this team really is. San Francisco coming to Philadelphia is not just another playoff game. It's a measuring stick moment, and it exposes everything that has been inconsistent about the Eagles all season. On paper, this is a matchup the Eagles should control. San Francisco is limping into the postseason. They are missing their most important defensive pieces, including Fred Warner and Nick Bosa, 2 players who completely change how an offense has to operate. Without them, the 49ers are one of the least effective teams in the league at generating pressure with their front four. That matters, because when the Eagles' offense has struggled this year, it has almost always been tied to pressure up the middle and an inability to stay ahead of the chains. This is the type of opponent that removes excuses. Jalen Hurts should have time. The offensive line should win up front. A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith should have favorable matchups against a secondary that has been vulnerable all season. And that's why this game feels like a turning point for the entire offensive identity. There's no elite pass rush to blame. No dominant linebacker erasing the middle of the field. If the Eagles stall, if drives die in the red zone again, if the offense goes flat for long stretches, then the criticism won't be about matchups anymore. It will land squarely on execution and coaching. Kevin Patullo and Nick Sirianni have to prove they can put together a complete offensive game plan and stick with it for 4 quarters. The same goes for the running game. This final regular season game quietly showed something important. Tank Bigsby is not just depth. He brings a running style that this offense has been missing at times. Decisive cuts, downhill power, consistent positive yards after contact. This offense has been plagued by negative runs and stalled drives, and Bigsby's skill set directly addresses that. That doesn't mean taking the ball out of Saquon Barkley's hands. It means using both backs intelligently, mixing styles, and making life easier on an offensive line that hasn't always been dominant in zone concepts. Against a banged-up San Francisco front, this should be a priority, not an afterthought. Defensively, this is where the Eagles can tilt the game if they stay disciplined. Brock Purdy has been playing better late in the season, but he is not immune to pressure or mistakes, especially when forced off his first read. The 49ers' offensive line has been dealing with injuries, and their weapons have not been consistently healthy. Christian McCaffrey is still the engine of that offense, but the Eagles have the personnel to limit him if they tackle well and don't overpursue. This is not the fully loaded San Francisco team from previous seasons. It's a resilient group, well-coached, but vulnerable. What cannot happen is self-inflicted damage. Penalties in the secondary, missed assignments, mental errors like the ones that showed up against Washington. In the playoffs, those mistakes don't just hurt, they end seasons. The Eagles cannot afford another game where backups or rotational players are forced into situations they're not ready for mentally. The margin for error is gone now, and that's why the frustration over Week 18 lingers. That margin didn't have to disappear so soon. Still, there's something to be said about this team's resilience. They've been through deep playoff runs. They've played in hostile environments. They've faced pressure moments. This locker room knows what January football demands. And there's a version of this team that can absolutely make a run if they stop getting in their own way. The talent is real. The opportunity is still real. But belief alone won't carry them anymore. Execution will. This wild card game isn't just about beating the 49ers. It's about proving that the Eagles can finally put together a clean, authoritative performance when it matters most. No excuses about seeding. No debates about rest versus risk. Just football. Win, and the conversation changes. Lose, and this decision will be replayed all offseason as the moment the road got unnecessarily harder. Now it's on the players and the coaches to write the ending themselves. If you want more breakdowns like this throughout the playoff run, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the like button if you're riding with the birds into January, and keep your eyes on the screen because the next chapter of this postseason story is just getting started. Fly, Eagles, fly. What makes this moment so defining is that there are no more buffers, no more weeks to figure it out, and no more room for philosophical debates about process versus results. January strips everything down to reality. The Eagles are either a team capable of imposing their will, or they are a team that has been surviving on talent while being dragged down by hesitation and self-inflicted wounds. This postseason will answer that question very quickly. When you look at this roster honestly, there is enough here to beat anyone. The offensive line, when healthy and focused, is still one of the most physically imposing units in the conference. The skill position talent is elite. A.J. Brown commands coverage every snap. DeVonta Smith is as reliable and technically sound as any receiver in football. Saquon Barkley still changes defensive game plans by simply being on the field. The issue has never been whether the Eagles can win. It's been whether they consistently choose the most aggressive, efficient path to do so. That's why this playoff run feels like a crossroads for the coaching staff. The conservative tendencies that showed up in Week 18 didn't come out of nowhere. They've been present all season in second halves, in situational football, in moments where pressing the advantage mattered. Against San Francisco, those tendencies cannot resurface. You cannot coach scared in the postseason. You cannot protect hypothetical futures while the present slips away. The Eagles need to dictate, not react. Defensively, this is where leaders have to step forward. The front must collapse the pocket, not just contain. Linebackers must be decisive, not hesitant. The secondary must play smart, disciplined football. There is no excuse for repeated penalties, blown coverages, or mental lapses at this stage. This is playoff football at Lincoln Financial Field. If the Eagles want to reclaim their identity as one of the most intimidating teams in the NFC, it starts with clean execution and physical dominance. And there's another layer to all of this that fans feel but don't always say out loud. The Eagles are tired of moral victories, tired of explanations, tired of almost had it narratives. This fan base has seen what championship caliber football looks like. They know when a team is maximizing its potential and when it's leaving something on the table. That's why the frustration over the 2 seed still lingers. Not because the season is doomed, but because the standard here is higher. If this team goes on a run, beats San Francisco, and keeps stacking wins, that Week 18 decision will fade into background noise. Winning cures everything, but if the Eagles stumble, if they come out flat, if they lose a game they were built to control, that moment will be remembered as the turning point where the margin disappeared by choice, not circumstance. This is the test now. No more hypotheticals. No more what-ifs. Just results. The Eagles still have the talent to make noise in this postseason, but talent alone won't carry them anymore. Urgency, clarity, and conviction will. There's also a psychological edge to this matchup that can't be ignored, and it's something you feel more than you see on a stat sheet. The Eagles and the 49ers don't just play each other, they challenge each other's identity. These games have been physical, emotional, and personal for years now. That matters in the playoffs. Veterans remember it, coaches remember it, fans definitely remember it, and that tension can either sharpen your focus or completely derail you if you're not mentally locked in. For the Eagles, the biggest internal battle is discipline. Not discipline in effort, but discipline in decision-making. Too often this season, momentum has been wasted. A strong opening drive followed by conservative play calling. A defensive stop followed by a penalty that keeps the opponent alive. Those moments add up, and against a well-coached team like San Francisco, you don't get many chances to recover. Kyle Shanahan will take whatever you give him. If you play soft, he'll methodically bleed you. If you miss tackles, he'll punish you with yards after contact. That's why execution has to be sharp from the first snap. This is also where leadership shows up in real ways. Not speeches, not quotes. Real leadership shows up in situational football, third and short conversions, red zone efficiency, getting off the field on third down, protecting the football. Those are the areas that decide playoff games, and they've been inconsistent for Philadelphia. The encouraging part is that these are correctable issues. The concerning part is that they've lingered for most of the season. Another subplot that matters is how this team responds if things don't start perfectly. If San Francisco lands an early punch, does the offense stay patient? Does the defense stay composed? Or do we see the same pressing, the same breakdowns, the same forced plays? The Eagles have shown both versions of themselves this year, and that's why predicting this game feels so tense. The ceiling is high. The floor is dangerous. What's clear is that this is no longer about potential. It's about proof. Proof that this coaching staff can manage a playoff game without overthinking it. Proof that this offense can sustain production for 4 quarters. Proof that this defense can play fast without playing sloppy. Proof that the Eagles are not just a good regular season team, but a team built to survive January. If they get past San Francisco, everything opens up again. Confidence changes. The narrative shifts. The earlier frustration becomes fuel instead of regret, but that only happens if they take control of the moment instead of letting it control them. This game is a fork in the road, and the direction they choose will define how this season is remembered. What keeps pulling this conversation back is that the Eagles are standing right on the line between being dangerous and being disappointing, and that line is thinner than it's been at any point this season. The talent advantage that carried them through stretches of the regular season won't automatically show up anymore. In the playoffs, preparation, timing, and trust in your identity matter just as much as raw ability. And that's why this moment feels heavier than just one wild card game. There's a sense that this roster is still waiting to fully unleash itself. We've seen flashes. We've seen dominant drives, suffocating defensive stretches, and moments where the Eagles look like a team no one wants to face. But we've also seen hesitation. We've seen stretches where the offense plays tight, where the defense loses composure, and where decisions feel reactive instead of intentional. Against San Francisco, that imbalance will be exposed immediately if it shows up again. This is also where the environment matters. Lincoln Financial Field in January is not just home field advantage, it's pressure. It fuels energy, but it also demands confidence. The crowd expects aggression. It expects urgency. If the Eagles come out conservative or passive, that energy can flip quickly. The players feel it. The sidelines feel it. This fan base knows when a team is playing to win versus playing not to lose. That dynamic will be impossible to ignore. From a football standpoint, the blueprint is simple, even if execution isn't. Win early downs. Stay ahead of the chains. Force Brock Purdy to hold the ball. Limit explosive plays. On offense, finish drives. Touchdowns, not field goals. The Eagles cannot afford another postseason game where red zone inefficiency keeps an inferior opponent alive. Those missed opportunities have been the difference between advancing and going home in January before. And this is where the earlier decision to rest starters still echoes. Not because the Eagles are doomed, but because every playoff game now carries that extra weight. There's no safety net, no softer landing. Every round feels like the hardest possible version of itself. That doesn't make a championship impossible, but it does demand near-perfect football. That's the trade-off that was made. The players know this. They won't say it publicly, but they feel it. Veterans understand windows don't stay open forever. Seasons like this don't come around easily. The NFC is brutal, and opportunities have to be seized when they appear. This postseason is about urgency matching ability. If those two finally align, the Eagles can still make noise. If they don't, the disappointment will linger far beyond this year. This is where belief meets reality. Not blind optimism, not constant criticism, but honest evaluation. The Eagles have everything they need to win. What they've lacked at times is conviction. January has a way of exposing that quickly. What ultimately defines this stretch is that the Eagles are no longer being judged against expectations from August or projections from September. They're being judged against themselves, against what they've shown they can be, and against the mistakes they've repeated when the spotlight gets brighter. That's the uncomfortable part of this conversation, because it removes excuses completely. There's no matchup advantage to hide behind anymore. There's no injury crisis to point at. There's no next week we'll clean it up. This is it. The version of the Eagles that shows up now is the version that will be remembered. And that's why this feels like a referendum not just on one game, but on the entire approach that's been taken down the stretch. If the Eagles play fast, assertive, and disciplined football, they can overwhelm San Francisco and anyone else